ecosystem for young transformers in philanthropy, in African philanthropy to be precise. And so thank you for joining our series again. If you started with us from the beginning, we started with the reckoning. We asked ourselves if philanthropy had achieved everything it had said it would achieve. We asked ourselves what the next generation would say 20 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now, what they would say about us. And then we moved on to last week, where we asked ourselves about capital and how it's moving, philanthropic capital in Africa. And we talked about the kitchen and how we need to rebuild the kitchen and its sovereignty as young people based on our own needs and what Africa needs too. Today, we're taking it to the community. We want to understand, has it done what it needs to do for the community? Is it impacting the community in the same way that we always make these assumptions that it does? I am happy to hand this session over to your moderator for the day, and that is Reon van der Merwe from South Africa, who is the founding director of Impacting Youth. And Reon, take us away.
Thank you, Tembi, and thank you for everyone who joined us here today for this installment in this series of conversations. As Tembi pointed out, this is not where the conversation is starting and it's not where it's going to end, but this is a very important item that we're going to be looking at today, which is a community paradox. Who does philanthropy serve? A very spicy topic, a topic that is often discussed. We know there's probably going to be a lot of issues coming out today, and so we're excited to be joined by our provocateur, as well as a panel of young leaders in the philanthropy space, in the community space, who are going to be sharing their perspectives with us on this important topic. And so, as Timmy mentioned, I'll be moderating the discussion today. We're going to have first our provocateur coming in, then we'll have some submissions from our panel. But please, those who are also attending, we'd love to hear your perspectives. So as thoughts are coming up, as ideas are coming up, please do put them in the chat, raise your hand, and we'd love to invite you into the conversation. And so without wasting any time, I'm going to start us off with our provocateur. But just to give some context, our provocateur is meant to put all the controversial ideas out there, to start the conversation high. We don't have a lot of time, and there's a very deep well of topics to go into. And so our provocateur is here to set the bar, to set the conversation, and for us to unpack all of the different items that they are raising. So I'm here joined by Tchanlandjou Kpare. Just trying to pronounce the name correctly, but I will get there. And he will be also giving us an overview on some of the controversial issues related to this community paradox. What is it? Why does it look this way? What are some of the items that we in the region need to keep in mind, especially in this time when we're being challenged in the development sector? Philanthropy is being challenged, communities are being challenged, and this is a relationship that we have to get right in this trying time. So, Tchanlandjou, over to you.
Thank you, Reon, for really introducing me, and also thanks for the African Youth, Philanthropy Network for really giving us opportunity to have this tough, let's say, job of talking about the paradox, the community paradox, and who does, the philanthropy really serve. So I'm Tchanlandjou again once time, and I'm acting as regional director for Ashoka Sahel, and basically I'm based in Senegal and covering the French-speaking countries. But again, our work is really beyond, the French-speaking country. We do operate across the world also. And let me start by really naming something that we rarely say out loud in rooms like this one. Most of us, including me as well as myself, are not the community. We are intermediary layer, basically. We are the people who often, most of the time, talking about the communities, who write the proposal for the communities and who travel for conferences about communities. And yet we often leave, those communities poorer in time, autonomy, and trust than when we arrived. And this is really critical. And that is the paradox. And we have been, cycling it politely for a long time now. So today, really, I'm going to offer you a kind of roadmap, but really not. I'm not going to offer you a roadmap. I'm going to offer you a mirror. And why this mirror? Because again, here is the standard story when we are talking about the philanthropy. We have a generous donor or a foundation or a government or a billionaire who sees suffering. And then they mobilize resources at the end of the day. They fund organization. Then the change happens on the ground. But there is a clear story behind the scene. And there is a compelling, or they are saying that there is a hero who came up and then saved, and there are beneficiaries also at the end of the journey. But the only problem that is leaving out the most important character is that the community itself is a subject rather than an object. That's really important. The community turned to be a subject rather than an object. And for me, from my own experience, I've been spending, almost 15 years now, working across West Africa mostly, and also across Africa. And we have identified and supported some social innovators as well as some change makers building ecosystems. But the single most important and consistent observation I can share with you based really on my experience is the further from the community a funding decision is made, the less likely it is to be correct. Because there is someone somewhere taking decision for that community. So not because the funders are bad people, or they are most brilliant people and committed and genuinely motivated by the impact at the end of the day, but because the distance distortion, that's how I'm calling it, the distance distort everything. And because the incentive also, the structure of the philanthropy itself, the reward reporting and not the result, the visibility, not the viability, the legibility to donor, not the legitimacy to the communities. These are some of the critical issues. So there are some parts that really says very quietly, the philanthropy as currently, the way that is really structured does not primarily serve the community. That's the truth, that's the facts. It primarily serves the emotional and the reputational needs of the donor and the institution, survive especially for the large NGOs. And also, most of the time, for career trajectory. And for the intermediaries, which again includes many of us in this room. It's unfortunate, but that's the truth. So I will give you a colleague of mine, an example. We have this brilliant young lady from Senegal who have attended the Africa Future Forwards, which recently happened in Kenya, Nairobi. Her name is Gay. So this young lady, she wrote something very powerful for me that stood out. She said, and she was arguing that the international, solidarity as we have built it, often organized on dependency, so we depend on them rather than autonomy. So the real question we should ask ourselves is, how much are we giving? About how are we organizing the condition under which communities can sustain themselves without us? So that is the harder question, and it requires us to imagine our own obsolescence. So this is a hard question at the end of the day, but in the philanthropy, the way that is made is almost structures, design does not really reward that imagination. So to be more specific, for instance, when we are getting the philanthropy, the way that is structured, so the cost for the intermediary layer, that's where we have to look close. So for instance, we have this publication, this research that has been done by the Foundation in 2024. And guess what? From their consultation, they find out that many African civil society Africa were cautious that it's polite word. I mean, the cautious is really a polite word in a sense that about the opportunity that intermediaries bring And those intermediaries, the one that whether the intermediaries support genuinely the transformation, but they really depend entirely on how the power is structured in the relationship. So without confronting that, intermediaries do not neutralize power and ambivalence, but they compound them, definitely. And this is really a challenge. So when we are looking at it in practice, a foundation, what does it mean? A foundation in the global north decide to fund education, for instance, in Africa, and then they know, so they don't really inform about the context. And therefore, they are deciding to hire a consultant. And that consultant recommends a mid-sized international NGO with good reporting standards. And it's that NGO that sub-grant to a regional organization. And that regional organization will sub-grant now to a national network. And that's how it works. So the national organization will eventually reach out a local association, for instance, in Fatick, which is a secondary city in Senegal, or in Lomé, or in Tamale. I'm just naming those who are West Africa that I'm really familiar with, but it can be in Kakuma, for instance. So, the impact of that means that we have 30% of every dollar that left the original funder accounts. That's the reality. But there is something that nobody also is mentioning. Because when we are talking about those layers in the chain, so there is an extraction that has been done in terms of the vocabulary, the narrative, the framing, and then the reporting format. The theory of change also is really impacted in that process so far. Because the local association, for instance, in Fatick or in Kakuma, must now describe its own work in their own language, with their own log frame. Yes, by using the SMART objectives that has been assigned, with also all the quarterly reporting that needed to be done. But those language at the beginning has been designed from Washington or from Paris or from Brussels. So that means that not for the women in the community who build the organization with their own words, it can be in Serero or in Wolof or in Swahili. So this has been translated by one of the well-known and well-positioned organizations across Africa, the WACSI, maybe some of you, the West African Civil Society Institute, who have named this directly when they launched what they are called the Ringo Initiative, reimagining the international NGO. So the diagnostic was really, for a long time, international NGOs has been a kind of vehicle through which funding is passing. But they are doing, they are just promoting the neo-colonialism way of working with local partners. It is unfortunate, but that's the facts. So for us, we need now to rethinking and then to starting reimagining the way that we are doing things. Just giving my example, my personal example, I founded a school, a smart bilingual academy, for instance, in a secondary city. And for me, that school is built by and for a community. And the idea really, because that community has been left behind. And for me, it wasn't really about the money, but how can we really ensure that our curriculum match the needs of the local community? Nobody funded us at the beginning. We started by our own. And then for us, it is a way of the greatest gift because we started with our own. Because we know that it's costs to build something real. We know what it costs to build something real. But for us, it's not about the money. It's also about the condition and then the dignity in how we are really making things happen. So the dignity is really crucial also in how things are doing. And let me share you some of the things from the experience that we have learned. For instance, we have example from the fields. As I'm working, hearing from the change makers and the innovators within our network, and also some of the initiative. Let's say we have this cooperative on nutrition based in Ouagadougou, and also some of our fellows from Kenya, from Rwanda, from, South Africa, and also hearing what some of the young people within the Africa Youth, Philanthropy Network are saying. What they are saying is, we need really to hear what's happening on the ground. And the need is really, there is a need of flexible capital. It's not a project funding, but organizational funding. The ability to pay salary, rents an office, and fix a vehicle, take a risk without really sending a 40-page of concept notes. That's the need, and from what we have here. And the need also time is not having a 12-month grant, but they need a multi-year partnership that really allow them for learning, for iteration, and also for the kind of slow trust building. That's really community work required, because when you are working on community, you need really to work on the trust, and also they need access to direct relationship with the funders instead of mediation, instead of having people, the middlemen, let me just put it on that way. But perhaps they need also the legitimacy, because to be recognized also as experts in their own context, but not as local implementing partners. That's how they have been seen. So we don't want really for someone else to strategize, but they need also to do their own strategy. So for me, again, just to finish up there, a quick one, I think the critical question here is not, the issue is not the money, but is about the power. Who owns the power? Who really owns the power? Because at the end of the day, those funders, those who are really coming up with their vision, and then they're trying to look good, and because there is a narrative also behind that, they will be, saying that, okay, I've done well, and then I'm great with my conscience. But no. So is how can we really work to ensure that the problem doesn't really reflect on the funding, but really on the power. So at the end of the day, we need to have this community that genuinely be also led accountable, because we need first to accept that the community need to be held accountable, and then through that, there is things that can change. The last part of my intervention is, if the power truly shifts to community, what would philanthropy have to give up? So the answer might be uncomfortable for some of us here, but foundation will have to give up the narrative control, the ability to claim the impact, the brand outcomes, and to put the logo on transformation that communities build, because it's coming from the community. Intermediaries also will have to give up the positional relevance. That means that the consultant contract, the capacity building workshops that all of us are really eager to attend, the mediation roles that justify their existence in the chain, and also program officers. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of program officers here would have to give up curational power, the ability to really to decide who is really for funding, whose the theory of change is credible, and who community is organized enough to receive direct support. So for all of us, I mean, everyone in this, virtual room will have to give up the comfortable illusion, okay, that proximity to community work is the same as accountability to community. So for me, the community paradox is not really, when we are saying, even the term, when we are saying the community, paradox, is not really a paradox. A paradox, according to me, is something that appear, contradictory, but contain a hidden truth. But this is not that, what we are seeing. This is a system functioning exactly as designed. It is a system that we have designed, and it's functioning exactly how we have designed it. So the cycle of resources through institutions that look like change while really preserving, the structural condition that make change necessary. Again, I'm repeating myself. The cycle of resources through institutions that look like change while preserving the structural conditions that make change necessary. That's why all of us, we are existing. So the question is not whether we can do better within that system, but the question is whether are we or we are willing to build that different one. So one where the community are not just the destination of philanthropy, but it is the author. So in Ashoka language, not the beneficiary, but the change makers. So the difference is not the semantic, but it is everything. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tchanlandjou, and I think we can give you a round of applause with our emojis. I saw some reactions earlier. I think we are thoroughly provoked in our thinking, and I think in a moment I'm going to invite our panelists for today up to also reflect on what you've shared, but also share their own lived experiences in some of these things. But before I do that, I'd also just like to ask them to turn on their cameras as we transition to the panel, and to also keep them on for the duration of the discussion. And I think I want to reflect briefly on what you said, Tchanlandjou, is in that this is a structural problem. This isn't just something that can be fixed with a little tweak here, a little change there. The entire structure needs to be changed. And one thing that stood out from what you said is this essence of, can philanthropy actually make itself irrelevant? Can it design a system where its own relevance and existence eventually stops being relevant? Or is it actually just feeding into a system where it's creating that dependency on its own terms? I mean, I really love the part where you said that they focus on the emotional and the reputational needs rather than the actual needs of the communities. And I think we've seen this, and we'll hear some of this from our panel as well. So I'd then like to transition over to three ladies who are leading in philanthropy that we have here with us today. The first one, and I'll also allow them to introduce themselves in their own words, but just to give a little bit of context, we have Marian Murunga, who is the Executive Director of Jenga AfriHub. We have Hausatu Amidu, who is from Volunteer Corps Africa in Ghana. And then we have Relebohile Lefojane, the head of DISA. And so, ladies, welcome to the discussion. I hope that you were able to also hear what our provocateur was saying. And now we want to hear from you in terms of your lived experience, in terms of, are you seeing the same thing on the ground in your work, in the communities that you work with? I'd like to start off with just a quick round of introduction for you to also give us some context as to what is the work that you do, so that we know that the context and the community you're coming from. And in that introduction, I'd also like to invite you to share maybe one word that characterizes, in your view, the relationship between communities and philanthropy in the area that you work in. So one word, and then you could give us also a little bit of an explanation of why you chose that word. As you were listening to our provocateur, a word that came to mind for your context between philanthropy and communities as you're introducing yourself. I think with that, I will start maybe off with Relebohile, if you would be so kind as to start us off with a brief introduction of yourself, your organization. Relebohile, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. You're also still muted. All right, I think you might be facing some network issues there, Relebohile, so we will come back to you. Hopefully we can get you back online. I'll then hand over to Hausatu, if you would be so kind as to share with us. Are you still muted?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, it's actually raining at my end, so I hardly hear. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Amidu Hausoto once again, a CorpsAfrica volunteer currently facilitating community-led initiatives in one of the rural communities in the central region of Ghana. And one word that I would say stand out for me with this conversation is progress, because relating it to where I'm currently serving, before I was deployed as a volunteer, my perception about development was totally different from the actual meaning of development in this grassroots community. So yes, I would say progress is the word of the day for me, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So progress, really strong word there. And we'll unpack that a little bit in the discussion as well. Marian, over to you. Brief introduction, yourself, the organization, and what word stands out to you in this relationship between communities and philanthropy.
Thank you so much. Greetings. I'm joining in from Kenya. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. My name is Marian Murunga. I'm the Executive Director of Jenga AfriHub. I'll just quickly post it on the chat because it's a Swahili word here in Kenya. So Jenga, as the word suggests, means building. And so our main focus is building and empowering young people and adolescents. We work a lot with underserved communities in rural Kenya. Quickly, one word that for me would describe kind of links community and philanthropy. I think for me, it's power. There's so much power in philanthropy, and community has so much power, but we need to regain that power so that we are able to influence it as a community. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Marian. So progress and power, two very powerful words that we have there. I just want to check, Relebohile, if we have you back online. All right, I don't think we have Relebohile back online yet, but in the absence, I think we'll continue the conversation and she will come in when we go ahead with this. So just to also again encourage our panelists to please keep your camera on as far as possible, that'd be great. So unpacking this question, and our provocateur highlighted this in saying that proximity to communities is the most important thing. And I think one thing that both of you have mentioned is that whether you're working in communities like Hawasatu or you're helping others work in communities, it's very important that it is based in their needs and what they actually need from us as philanthropy or from within themselves. And so I just want to ask our discussants, what is it that communities that you work with need most? If we had to diagnose to say, what is it that they need from philanthropy, from each other? Let's start there so that the conversation is rooted in their needs. I see we've lost Hawasatu, so maybe we'll start with you, Marian.
And I lost you a bit. Could you please come up again with a question, please?
Yes. So in terms of the needs of the communities that you serve, so as you mentioned, the organization works to empower young people in communities. What are the needs that they actually have? If we were to relay it to any stakeholder, to philanthropy, what would you say they are?
I think one key thing that's my community, one of their greatest needs, and working in a very underserved kind of community, one of the key things I've seen is, people are still living in very high level of poverty in my community. And that then kind of has a ripple effect on everything. If we have children coming from very poor families, poor communities, then you realize they'll not be able to even go to school. They'll not be able to secure employment opportunities. They'll then be locked out of the development process of any nation. And so I think for us, which I know cuts really across, is poverty. And that is one of the greatest need. But again, just relating it to philanthropy, how best can we then even involve the community in first understanding that this is the need that they are having, but how can we co-create solutions with them so that, our solutions are not being decided at a super top level and being brought down to them, but we are coming together to say, the problem here, the challenge here is poverty. How then do we co-create solutions to suit their context, to suit their situations, and just design solutions that speak to their actual needs? Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think the words that stand out there are, how do we help communities, first of all, understand their needs, but also how to articulate them, in a way that they can build a relationship and that level of trust with other stakeholders, but also at the same time, the co-creation element. So thank you for that. Abukayo, I don't know if you were able to hear the question or if you would like me to repeat it.
I would like you to repeat the question once more.
All right, perfect. Just a reflection from your view on the needs that the communities that you work in actually have. We've now emphasized that when we speak about the relationship between philanthropy and communities, there's often a lot of assumptions made about needs, made about what the community actually wants and needs. So from your perspective, what are you seeing on the ground?
Thank you once more. So with my perspective, I would say community members, first and foremost, they need trust, okay? They need trust from the end organization that is coming to support them with whatever the initiative is. I'm saying this because reflecting back to my encounter when I was first deployed in my communities, they were a little skeptical about whatever initiative CorpsAfrica was about. This was because of a broken trust they've had with past organizations. But when I explained further to them that our initiative or our mode of work is community-led and they are the center of every activity, eventually they began to understand and everything is now flowing smoothly. So in a nutshell, I would say community members, they need a lot of things, but the critical thing is trust, that you trusting that they should be part of decision-making. With that one, they know that whatever that you are bringing to them is genuine and you are not going to leave them along the line. So yes, trust is one of the things that they need. And also respecting their indigenous knowledge. So these local communities, when you come there with what you have predefined for them, the turnout or its sustainability will not be assured. However, when you come to them and speak to them one-on-one to know what they actually need on the ground, to know how they are doing their own things in their own way, when you respect that indigenous knowledge system, I think, which is mostly overlooked by many organizations. So this is another need that community members need, for you to respect their indigenous way of doing things, their old ways of doing stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Abukayo. Thank you. I see that Rebukile has not yet joined us again, but once she rejoins, we'll loop her into the conversation. Marian, I wanted to reflect on this issue that was raised by our provocateur around this almost supply chain of funding that happens in the global philanthropy sector, where you have, an NGO gives to an intermediary who then gives to a national structure, who then gives to a community structure. And that's how the resources reach the communities. But at the same time, the resources aren't neutral. They reach that point with a certain language, a certain framing already imposed, that by the time they reach the communities, it's not what do you need, it's here's what we think you need, how can you fit into our model? So in your work, as you're supporting young people, as you're working in these communities, how do you overcome this? What are some of the ways that you try to break this power imbalance that exists, or to at least challenge it? Marian, did you get? No, sorry, that was directed at Marian. Marian, did you get that question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me just respond. Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of funding or donors are kind of working through intermediaries to reach out to, local communities. And sometimes I try to see it as a best practice because I feel like if a donor, for example, in the US or in the UK, implements a project directly with the community, I mean, I tend to understand if the community is not involved from the word go in even designing this program, there still be a very huge gap between the community and the donor. But if the donor has kind of maybe one intermediary, and let's take, for example, a local youth-led organization at the community level that they can then trust with the resources, knowing that this local organization works with the community directly, then I see by the end of the day, the impact would be at scale and the community would have been involved because then this local organization is closer to the community that they kind of want to support with addressing the issues. But you still see an increased rate of, there's power imbalance. We've had situations where even the local organizations that are being subgranted by donors still take advantage of that. And by the time they're receiving funding, they're still not able to involve the community even in the designing of their programs from the word go. So as a local organization, the practice that we've always had to ensure that we integrate in our program implementation is ensuring that right before implementation, we involve the community. And we do this through very local community engagements. We engage with the community leaders. We have what we call community barazas. Community baraza is something like just bringing community together. And what we do is really to understand, is the problem we want to address the actual problem that the community is facing? Or if that is the problem, how would they join us in just like kind of addressing the issue? And so we've made it a practice to always involve them at the designing stage and ensuring that even through the implementation, the solution is a reflection of the problem, but also it's a reflection of the feedback they keep on giving us. We also have a community feedback kind of box that we use to just collect feedback from the community on the progress of projects. And sometimes if they feel like the project is not being implemented in a way that they would have wished, they always share that very honest and accurate feedback. But again, that doesn't mean that by the end of the day, we still achieve that because you realize there's still an expectation that community has always had. Once we receive money from the donor, there's always the expectation that it's now on us, and community tends to now, kind of want everything to be done for them and trying to avoid a situation where we are coming together to design a solution for a problem. So I think for me, one of the best practices to always counter this challenge is just always to ensure that community is involved from the word go all the way to the end, monitoring and evaluation, to also just kind of get the new learnings. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Marian. I think those are two very important points, including the communities in the design, but also the ongoing feedback, the boxes that you mentioned. I think that's really, really important because organizations come in with projects, they start off, and the only time they collect feedback is at the very end. And then if something didn't go right or it didn't really meet the need, then it's already outside the funding period. So then we'll cover it in the next project. But ongoing feedback allows us to be responsive to the needs of community. I'd like to invite, I see Relebohile is back, and I'm going to invite her back into the conversation in a moment. And I also see our other speaker, Sadia Atiku, has joined us. I'm also going to invite you into the conversation, Sadia. So what I'd like to do is just to Relebohile give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, your organization. Same for you, Sadia. I know you also come from the same organization as Horisatu. But for you, Sadia and Relebohile, what are the consequences that you're seeing of that donor imbalance, that power imbalance between donors and those on the ground? What are the consequences that you're seeing in your work from that? So Relebohile, I'll hand over to you first. You're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, okay, fine. Thank Thank you so much, Reon. A very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Relebohile Lefojane. I'm from Lesotho. I am actually involved with quite a lot of organizations in philanthropy. Firstly, and I think most importantly, I am part of a grassroots organization in Lesotho, which I'm the founder and chairperson of, called Ntlafatso Foundation, also with the Southern Africa Youth Forum, but also as well am part of the international organizations where I play the advisory role called RightsCon. So just to address the question is, what is the power imbalance that I have maybe experienced between the donors and the let's say the grassroots organizations? I can say that one of the things, I think also this was also mentioned by the first person who spoke, that when the donors grant the money, or rather when they grant the funding, there are restrictions. And oftentimes the restrictions don't fully meet the needs of the community. So it's actually at times more like, okay, we're just passing on a project, but when we actually evaluate, the question is, did we really meet the needs of the community? And then secondly, another power imbalance is that the grassroots organizations are actually the ones who know the needs in the community. The fact that they don't sit on the decision making, the fact that they are on the boardrooms of decision making, where before even funds can be distributed, they can sit and say, these are the needs. It was also mentioned that, for example, the education system, does it really meet our needs as Africans? Does it align, especially with the resources that we have? Because a more effective education that does not only produce graduates is the one where we also check the resources that we have. We leverage on what we have. We capacitate skills based on what we have. So those are some of the power imbalances that I have come across in my workspace. Thank you, Reon.
Thank you, Relebohile. Sadia, over to you to also introduce yourself. And I also would like to, Sadia, before you do that, there's a question that Thembi has posted in the chat, which I think is a really important question. Mm-hmm. Are we seeing communities building initiatives of their own? So that kind of agency and independence, and what do these initiatives look like? So over to you, Sadia.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you. I think we might be having some connection issue. You can try again, Sadia, and then we can hear you. All right. I think maybe as we wait for Sadia's connection to stabilize, Sadia, I think I'm going to hand that question over to you. Maybe just reflecting, as you work in communities, as you're volunteering, are you seeing any signs of communities organizing themselves, building their own initiatives, independent of philanthropy, and what do those look like?
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, I would say a big yes. Communities are actively. Sadia.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Just to check if Sadia is back. Sadia, can you hear us? All right, I think Sadia's internet is not stable. Sadia, maybe if you can just check your internet, and then we will loop you back into the conversation, because we're not hearing you on our side.
Hello.
Can you hear us? We're hearing you briefly, but it goes away. All right. Sadia, maybe you can just give us a response while Sadia sorts out her internet.
Thank you very much. So I'll use my community as an example. before I was even deployed here to facilitate community-led development initiatives, they had already created a development committee on their own. And this development committee is in charge of running the developmental affairs of the organization. So they find their own way of generating funds to support their developmental projects, including building a community center, repairing the damaged bridges in the community, and even building a school park for the youth in the community. They find ways to generate income through making it a point to donate money from their funeral activities, from every community gathering that will bring people together. They made it a point that some amount are going to be contributed in order to go into the development account of the community. So yes, I would say communities are putting measures and initiatives in place to handle their own developmental needs when even before the aid of external donors come in. They are actively putting measures in place to take charge of their own development.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I think interesting that you should mention this, because it shows you the disconnect between philanthropy not leveraging what's already there and thinking that they need to come in and create something new, which also links back to what our provocateur was telling us. I think maybe I want to ask the same question to you, Marian. Are you seeing any similar initiatives? And maybe to build on that, why do you think philanthropy is not seeing them? Why are they not leveraging them?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I still see communities that really believe in the power of philanthropy. I've seen communities that are coming out very effortlessly to say, this is the problem we have, and this is the solution that we need to ensure that we put in place. And they, they give their time, they give their resources, and not only financial resources, it could be materials, it could be just their time, their technical expertise, and they work on something and they address it. Case in point, just for a minute, I recently did a back to school campaign that supports adolescents to stay in school. And the main thing was to ensure that we resource mobilize for menstrual products, but also other essential kits for adolescents. And what we did, we really wanted to engage the communities where these adolescents are coming from to mobilize for these resources. And we just started like an online fundraising, but also, walking into businesses and telling them, these are your girls, these are your children. We want to support them to stay in school for like a whole 3 months, a whole 1 year. And they were so interested, they were so passionate, and they were like, let's support our own girls. This is a problem we are having, but we can also come up with solutions. And so we got mentors from the community who even came during the back to school campaign. We had materials, we had menstrual products, we had religious leaders who are just keen to come and speak to the adolescents. So I can say philanthropy is still something that is highly embraced by communities, but I feel like we still need to engage communities on why that is important, because by the end of the day, we are closer to the problem, and so are we closer to the solutions to those problems. So I think we need to reimagine philanthropy from that perspective. And even as organizations that work at the very grassroots, the best practice for us is to ensure that we put communities at the center of our programming, like always and always, because there's less burden when you involve the community in your work, because then even in terms of sustainability, when this donor you had goes away, the people you remain with is community. So I think there's so much we can do in terms of investing in community, having them at the center of our programming, and ensuring that we keep consulting them and just taking in their feedback. So philanthropy is still something that we could still powerfully believe in. Yeah, and it works.
Thank you for that, Marian. I think a very important distinction that you made there. We usually use the word philanthropy to refer to what I could suppose we could call institutionalized philanthropy, which is your funds and your foundations. But I think the point that you're making there is that philanthropy is an organic thing to communities. Communities have always supported themselves. They've always used their internal, as you said, time, effort, capacity, and resources to solve problems. And so I think that's even in the framing of our conversation, who does philanthropy serve? We need to unpack the word philanthropy. We also know that, for example, remittances globally is one of the biggest sources of philanthropy, so to speak, and a lot of it is coming to and from our own continent. I see, Tchanlandjou, your hand is up, and I also invite others, if you have any comments, anything that's stirring that our panelists have highlighted, please do raise your hand. We'd love to hear your voice. Tchanlandjou, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. A quick one from my side, because I really love this question, and also I love all the answers that, the discussants have provided. I just give you an example. I just recall when I was a student, we used to be in this youth-led movement named ISEC. Maybe some of you have heard or, know about this youth-led organization. So basically we were giving our time, our money, doing a volunteering, activities, trying to empower young people, running community programs, and traveling across the world, making new friends with our own money. And this has been really putting us in this kind of movement where we have empowered ourselves. And again, making some new connections, which is an example. The second example is, again, here in Senegal, we have this religious position, which they are really powerful. And they have been able to organize young people in a sense that there is a time frame where young people who have belonged to that specific religious, brotherhood are just convening to a specific place, which is a farm, to harvest. And these young people are giving their time, their money, their energy to, again, harvest that big farm. And then what has been harvested will be sold, make money to, again, build some schools, some hospitals, making roads. So doing the things that belong to government. So doing really concrete things on the ground. And I can name numerous of them. You have those social entrepreneurs who are just finding or be facing some of the specific issue within their community, and then saying that, okay, what can I do about it? And then coming out with ideas, and then mobilizing their own resources to make it happen. And then we'll be bringing philanthropy. But the point here is the philanthropy actors, in their own right, with their own tradition of giving, this belongs to Africa. I mean, we used to it. We have our own models of solidarity, and also in terms of culture and accountability. Unfortunately, there is a dominant philanthropy system that does not recognize it. That's the truth. And it treats Africa giving as something that need to be encouraged and incubated. So therefore, it's not something to encourage or to incubate. No, because it's already existing. So now the point here is, how can we, work to really make it more broader, more known, and more understood, and also communicate about that. Just finish up, the CorpsAfrica is also a concrete example, since we have them as a discussant. They're just mobilizing, volunteering young people who are going, in communities, serving communities, and try to transform and to solve some of the most pressure issues in those communities that they are serving. So again, these are the concrete example of things that's working. Now, how can we make it more systemic, more structured, to be also understood and valued?
Thank you, Tchanlandjou. So how do we take what's already there and make it the structural norm, is what I'm also hearing. Relebohile, over to you. I see your hand is raised. Please come in.
Thank you, Reon. I'd also like to contribute to the question with what's working with the, grassroots initiatives of continuing to promote philanthropy. In my organization, Ntlafatso Foundation, what we do is we bridge the gap between graduates. After some graduates, they have their degrees and qualifications, but they are not work ready. So we have a mentorship program where we just really empower them with the different etiquettes, professionalism, communication, public speaking. And it has worked in such a way that we have been able to get most of them employed in private sectors, governments, where they are getting a formal, proper employment because of the skills that they were able to harness by just being part of our program. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Abukile. And I think it links in very well with what you were saying, Tchanlandjou, as well, is that philanthropy does have a role, but it has to be catalytic. It has to create a situation where a new state of being can be sustained after that, where philanthropy is not necessarily required, but we're actually seeing that impact living forward, whether it's in the form of skills and employment, whether it's in the form of the businesses that you mentioned. But not all philanthropy is actually doing that. Sometimes philanthropy is very stuck in its ways. So I see there's a question from Happiness in the chat about holding philanthropy accountable, the kind of storytelling that needs to happen. Happiness, I don't know if you want to come in and maybe give voice to your question, a little bit of context for our panelists. Happiness, I don't know if you're there, if you want to maybe just share with us a little bit of context around your question. I can see you are unmuted, but I'm not hearing you. I don't know if it's maybe the connection again. We're not hearing you, Happiness. So I think maybe once we can hear you, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It seems internet is not on our side today. There's forces that are conspiring against us. But I just want to touch on Happiness's question in the chat, because it's a very important one. Happiness is asking that how can philanthropy organizations create safer spaces for communities to openly critique funding systems without fear of losing support? Again, we are speaking about this in a very safe space under the banner of an organization like the AYPN, under the banner of our sponsors. But when you're out in the field and you're sitting across the table from a donor, are you going to say these things? How do we empower communities to actually be able to say these things? So that's the first question. I'm going to open it up to the panel, whoever wants to take that one. But there's a second question, which is also important, which is, what is the role of media and storytelling in holding philanthropy organizations and communities accountable? So that's the more society angle on accountability, whereas the other one is the more individual organization to donor. How do we protect the communities who actually do want to speak out? So those are two questions on the table. And I'm going to open it up to our panel to reflect on that, whoever feels they have something to share on that. Either one of the two questions. All right, if no one's going to step forward, then I'm going to use my moderator's privilege to maybe just ask Marian, in terms of your way of thinking, because you also work in communities very directly, and you may have experienced that power imbalance between an organization and a donor. But in terms of protecting communities in that relationship, what are your reflections on that? Is there something we can do?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was still reflecting on it, but let me just share a few thoughts that I have regarding that. I think that's a very good question and very timely. For a very long time, there's been a heavy reliance on donors for funding. And you find that it even becomes very difficult for organizations to critique, to say what is not going well, before a donor. Because then we're just like, what if that funding stops? What if that donor decides not to fund us for subsequent years? So I think there's a lot of unlearning to do. There's a lot of kind of inside work that we need to keep doing as youth-led organizations, so that we get to a point where we've got the power, we've got the urgency to know that we are able to, in a very constructive and in a very positive way, speak to a donor saying that we are representing communities and we are just not speaking as organizations. And by the end of the day, the challenges, the problems we are addressing also needs to reflect the needs of the community. So I think one, it's that, always letting the donor know that we are here not for ourselves, but also on behalf of the communities we serve. And secondly, it's a lot of unlearning to do to get to a level where we can rightfully call out a donor and say, in terms of programming, perhaps this we need to do like this we need to do like this. But I think there's still a long way to go in terms of just reimagining that whole thing. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think I'm going to go over to you, Relebogile, because I know that you are a storyteller at heart. And so the question about how do we use storytelling and media to hold philanthropy accountable and also break some of these power imbalances between communities and the philanthropies that support them. Curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, earlier today, I was reflecting on the gap on storytelling. Firstly, to say that, we are obviously, storytelling has a way of amplifying the work that we are doing, not only amplifying, but creating impact as well. But as well, the storytelling is very beneficial, I can say, for organizations, maybe urban organizations. But I was thinking about, what about those grassroots organizations where they lack resources to actually share what they have? How can their stories be known as well? How can their stories touch other lives as well? Well, I just thought of just starting with sharing that thought. But to get to your question, Reon, your question is, I want to know if I understood well. Your question is, how do we use storytelling to hold funders accountable? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So I think just really, in addition to the many reports that we submit as well, we can really leverage storytelling. We can really share those videos when we are in the rural areas, holding community dialogues on our social medias, but also even with the funders as well. All I can say is we can do it continuously. We can maximize it so that it's evidence. It's evidence that cannot really be denied. So I also think that in the digital era that we are on, as grassroots organizations or any other philanthropy related work that we do, this is a platform that we need to take. I mean, the storytelling is an aspect that we really need to prioritize, because it is the way that we have our evidence of the work that we are doing, and it can also help us to upscale and to continue to upscale our impact, and also to be able to bring more innovation. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Relebogile. And what it also stirs is something that Tchanlandjou said, where, there's a norm in philanthropy about how things should be done. And if we're telling stories in the way that you're saying, really showing what's happening on the ground, there's an opportunity to actually change that norm by saying this works better than that, and actually making that case using that evidence that you're mentioning. So thank you for that. Hawasatu, same question to you, also reflecting on how does your organization use storytelling to really show the needs of communities, show what's working, and give voice to what they're doing, their initiatives. You mentioned, for example, some initiatives that they are doing. How does your organization employ storytelling?
Okay. So with we actually one of the areas that we work on, right? It's advocacy for diseases that have a lot of stigmatization, among others, HIV and AIDS. We actually on our social media platform, on our Facebook, at times we go live. We have people who actually are HIV positive to share their stories. And also that invites credibility. It invites credibility, and you also are able to invite new partners by just the work that you do. Not only on social media, but also sometimes in communities, because sometimes we hold multi-stakeholder dialogues. We make sure that we bring people who are actually being affected by whatever we are advocating for to be able to share their stories. Not only that, we also host webinars. We will be hosting a mental health webinar because it's a mental health month now just towards the end of May, where we also have people who have really been affected by mental health to share their stories. So these stories bring healing to others. These stories empower others as well to own their stories. Not only that as well, it's also about to the funders to really attract the credible partners. Because of really being out there, I can say we have a testimony of credible partners really wanting to support the work that we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Rukile, for that. Hosatu, same question to you. How do you use storytelling in your organization?
Okay, thank you very much. So in CorpsAfrica, storytelling is one of our key components. So at least every volunteer posts something from their community at the end of every month. And our communication team are actively working 24/7 to ensure that information are being put out there on all our professional pages. When we come to the community level too, community members now understand that storytelling is part of our mode of work. So taking their pictures, making video of what the reality is on the ground, community project implementation has now become a norm, part of our work that we post on a daily basis on our professional pages like LinkedIn, TikTok, and all the social media handle. Through blog posts, through storytelling, and through videos, we always post it out there, which is very constant, and you can see it anywhere that you go. CorpsAfrica blog is everywhere. So yes, and I think it sells us very well because majority of the people out there do not know what CorpsAfrica is about. But with these daily posts from volunteers, from com teams, they are able to know what the entire community-led mode of development that CorpsAfrica is using is about. So I would say storytelling is a way to liberate the organization and to attract other funding partners to let them know what the actual reality is on the ground. And we are not sleeping on it when you come to CorpsAfrica. We are doing it very regularly. Yes.
Thank you for that. And I think what you pointed out there is really key. The role of your comms department. The comms department, both on a philanthropy side, but also on the community organization side, and the approach that you take. From what you shared as well, there's a centering of the voices of community members and the ability for them to give input from their lived reality into what you are platforming. You know, you're not telling people's story on behalf of them, is also what I'm hearing. Marian, I hope you're still with us. I can't see you on the screen anymore, but I'd also love to know how you center the voices of the community members that you work with in your projects. You're muted.
Yeah. So I think just as my other colleagues have spoken, storytelling is a very powerful tool, both for advocacy, but also as a way of just shifting power so that it doesn't remain with us as an organization. And what we do as a grassroots youth-led organization, we ensure that we allow the youth, we allow communities, we allow adolescents to speak about the impact of the projects that we implement at the grassroots. Because then by the end of the day, we cannot entirely say we are speaking on their behalf. Much of the progress can only be traced when recipients or beneficiaries, sorry to use a wrong word, can speak about the impact the programs are having on both their lives, but also at the community level. So I really believe that it's a strong way to amplify the work we keep doing. but also it's a way of just shifting power towards community, giving power to them, and making them even own the programs, on the organization, and always want to be part of what we do. Because by them being part of what we do, you realize even they'll now get into resource mobilization. They'd want to own the entire process, because first you acknowledge them by ensuring that they also have the power and the urgency. Yeah.
You are muted.
Even I will sometimes speak when I'm muted. Thank you, colleagues. Tchanlandjou, I see your hand. Just before I head over to you, I also just want to invite other audience members who are with us in the call to also raise your hand if you have a comment, if you have a question about what's being discussed, if anything is stirring something in you or an idea that you feel is worthwhile platforming here. I'd also just like to remind us that the reason why we're doing this conversation is because AYPN will also be capturing a lot of these inputs and contradictions and best practices that we are highlighting into their outcome documents that come from this series. So please do take this opportunity to let your voice be heard. In the absence of any other hands, Tchanlandjou, over to you.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of good things here. And again, once time, I really like this question from Happiness. And there is a statement that is mentioning that being findable to be fundable. I mean, you need really to create, the visibility in order to attract funders. And this is where, for me, I'm raising, let us not falling into that trap. Why? Because most of the time, we tend to really focusing on the storytelling, again, to attract, funders, to have more partners to support our work. But this is just a kind of distracting us from really serving the community. And we have seen also, unfortunately, some of the community-based organizations which have sold to the entire world that they are doing an amazing job, but as we used to say in French, quand tu grattes, tu te vois qu'il n'y a rien. This was in French, so I will try to put it in English. If you are just trying to, I don't know, to see what is behind the scene, you will see that there is nothing. So again, I think there, again, the storytelling parts, yes, but can we rethink another way of doing storytelling? Might be, why not, ensuring that we are involving one of our partners who is doing a kind of site visit to really, so that person, as we used to say in a kind of MLE, having an independent evaluator, having an independent, parties who are really doing our storytelling instead of we, again, selling our story. So I'm just, again, it's just a question, since we are talking about, the African Youth Philanthropy Network, which means that we are building the next generation of philanthropists. So we need to do things other ways. And the second point is beyond the media and the storytelling aspect, is creating the safe space. I think, yeah, that's really important in order to, not putting, the philanthropy in a position that they will feel like they are just pushed, I mean, they are not understood, but again, having, a kind of respectful, discussion, conversation, but again, putting the basis of how are we intend or planning to collaborate together. I think that's also really important, but it's starting now with this next generation of philanthropy. So it's not tomorrow, but now. What are the structure that we are putting in place to say, hey guys, if you want to support us, this is how we are seeing the new way of doing the philanthropy in Africa. And that's why, I think the AYPN is really powerful, being instrumental in this process.
Thank you, Tchanlandjou, for that. Relebogile, please come in.
Thank you, Reon. Still on how to use storytelling, I really just want to share a quick way, but from now Southern Africa Youth Forum, one of the, what can I say, innovative ways where we've used storytelling. This was really one to influence policy, which supports or rather speaks to ending of the killings of youth with albinism across the African continent. I can say that when we use storytelling with a targeted outcome, for example, being able to influence policy or something, that is also another innovative way, because at the end of the day, you didn't just tell stories, but eventually you can be able to have policies which can be able to enforce or be able to hold the relevant stakeholders and decision makers accountable in ensuring, for example, in this case, the safety of youth with albinism. So thank you, Reon.
Thank you, Relebogile. I'd also love to invite others. If you have any questions, comments, please do raise your hand. So just to position us now in our conversation so far, to address this question of the community paradox, who does philanthropy serve? I think we've identified that philanthropy has inherent flaws in its way of thinking and its way of doing that decenter the needs and the realities of communities and those in the communities. We've also made the point that communities are doing things themselves that are often overlooked, that they have agency to take action on issues, and that those need to become integrated into the structure and the nature of how philanthropy is done. We need to redefine the very word philanthropy to also include the efforts, the energy, the initiatives coming organically from communities and not just those that are top-down imposed. We've spoken to the reality that there needs to be safe spaces for communities and organizations to actually challenge the norms that have been assumed as dominant in the philanthropy space. And that storytelling can be an important element of that, and how we tell stories and why we tell stories. And as Tchanlandjou also pointed out, really breaking out of the mold of the more traditional way of being findable and fundable. That's a very corporatized way of looking at philanthropy, rather than an organic way to say, you know, how do we tell stories that, first of all, center the community, but also allow for an authentic voice and an authentic orientation towards impact, which I think is also something that many of the other speakers, Relebogile, you also just mentioned it, really having that target to say, we're trying to change something socially. We're not just trying to exist for the sake of existing. With all of that said, and with this reality that we still live in this community paradox, and here I would like input from all of our discussants, and also maybe a closing remark from our provocateur as we leave the space, is if you were sitting next to a decision maker in the institutional philanthropy space, you know, sitting, for example, next to the big ones, let's use the big ones for sake of an analogy, the Gateses, the OSFs, those ones, and you were sitting next to a decision maker at a table, at a dinner, next to the tea table at a conference, and you had an opportunity to change their mindset, how would you want their mindset to change? What's the one thing you would want them to think differently on that's going to help us get out of this paradox? So I'm going to invite our discussants to maybe reflect on that for a moment. And then I'll also invite them to come in on that. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments in the chat, but also for our attendees, please feel free to share in the chat. As I mentioned, we are collecting all of this for the outcome documents, and this will be shared with networks within the philanthropy space, of which Gates and OSF and those guys are very well part of that community and networks. And so we need to be vocal about how we want their minds to shift. I think maybe I'll start off. I see, Sadia, you want to start us off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if I should get the chance to sit with these big men, first of all, let them understand that these communities are not empty. They have the resources and capacity to lead their own development. However, they just need support in terms of technical and other aspects to bring it to life. They already have the solutions for their own problem. They just need support. So when you are coming in as a supporter or a funder, you have to work with them as partnership. In that regard, the project or whatever initiative it is will be sustained. Because when you come in with your predefined mode of work, trust me, you will come back the next time and you won't see any sign of sustainability with that regard. So these funders or donors have to now see is that community members have whatever it takes for them to develop. They just need support in the form of partnership, which is the community-led, to ensure that sustainability is achieved at the end of the day. So yeah, that's what's our input.
Thank you for that. And I think you captured it in that first sentence. It really got me. Communities are not empty. That is, I think, summarizes perfectly what you just said. Just for Marian, who had changed devices, Marian, the question is, if you were to sit next to an influential decision maker within the philanthropy space, the institutional philanthropy space, what's one mindset shift change that you would like to influence them to make? I see the hand, Lebohile, please, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Reon. I would actually emphasize on what she has already said, to say we are co-partners in development. We are not just receivers, but we are co-partners in development. And with that said, we would really like to be able to work with them on defining the parameters of funding so that we can be able to maximize what we have in order to have sustainable community impact.
Co-creating the parameters of funding. That stood out for me. Thank you, Lebohile. Very powerful intervention. Marian, can I hand over to you for your intervention?
Marian, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having a very unstable connection, so I might have missed out on the question. Or are we doing final remarks?
Yes, so your closing question is, what kind of mindset shift change would you like to see among the decision makers, so-called, of institutional philanthropy? All right, I think we've lost Marian again. Hopefully we get her back before we end off. Tchanlandjou, do you have any remarks on that?
So just quite briefly, I think one is
please go ahead, Marian. We can hear you now, but you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Please
Hello?
go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm saying community first, because there's so much power in just centering community needs and realities. There's so much we can do if we just involve community in making our decisions, designing programs, and ensuring they are meaningfully engaged all throughout the process, all the way towards monitoring and evaluation. So community is key, even in the decisions we make. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Marian. Tchanlandjou, over to you.
Yeah, so for me, I'll be just share with them that we have been doing from quite a long time now the same thing. We have seen the successes as well as, you know, the learnings and the failures. So can we really do better within the existing system? And there is something really tremendous and extraordinary going on the continent. There is this youth-led organization named the African, Youth Philanthropy Network, which is just at the starting point. And I think that you can just have a look at what's going there. It can inspire you in the way that you are operating.
Thank you for that, Tchanlandjou, and thank you also for those who are sharing in the chat their remarks. I think all of these inputs are very useful and will be captured. And might I say that I think the spirit of this webinar here, despite internet challenges, despite audio challenges, young people on our continent, we are still meeting, we are still discussing, We are still putting forward ideas. And I think that's also something that the philanthropy sector needs to learn, that it's not always going to be perfect, but it has to happen, and it has to be listened to. And so hopefully you've all found this insightful, and I know that this will all be captured in the outcome report that AYPN will be doing on this. And please also, I see that Thembi has shared it in the chat, the session that's happening next week as well. But I'm sure, Thembi, you will give us a bit more context on that in a moment. Thank you very much for allowing me to moderate this session and spending this time with you, the discussants, our provocateur, and for AYPN for convening this space and the spaces that are still to come. Over to you, Thembi.
Thank you so much, Reon. Thank you to you, Tchanlandjou, and our discussants. Oh my word, I've been scribbling away, and such a rich and educational conversation we're all having. I'm still stuck on building the safe spaces. I think one of the comments that came, one of the questions, the safe spaces in the media. And I'm like, is this a safe enough space that we've built, even with this series? I'm questioning a lot about what we are also doing as AYPN. And a lot of Tchanlandjou was throwing some punches at us, you know, as AYPN, because we function as an intermediary. So he was not holding back the punches. But the whole point of this space was for us to build an architecture, a new philanthropy that is not blinker focused on what we as AYPN think is what needs to happen, but more of what we as a collective, as young people across Africa, want to see and how we want to be served by philanthropy and how we want to amplify it as young leaders. And so thank you to all of you in the room, and thank you to our series partners, Ashoka Africa, African Youth Panel, Africa Evidence Youth League, For Africa, and SIOF, yes, Southern Africa Youth Forum, and Social Change Factory, who really just coming in and helping us think through all of this. And so thank you to everyone. Next week, this is an 8-part series. This was number 3. We have 5 more to go. Next week, we interrogate whose knowledge counts. We want to ask in philanthropy, whose knowledge really counts? Is it the donors? Is it the communities? Is it us as practitioners? Is it the beneficiaries, the recipients of the work we do? We really just want to interrogate the knowledge element of this, and we see how we all come together. And at the end of this series, we're not just talking. A policy brief is coming out of this, and we are starting an advocacy program really just based on all the inputs that all of you have been bringing here. And so that is enough from me, and that is enough all from all of us at AYPN. Thank you so much. Please do join us as a member, and let's build this architecture of philanthropy together as young Africans. Thank you for joining, and I will wrap it up here and see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.